political game. This is about transforming this organization and making it safe for women.
Tonight, a resolution to investigate gender-based discrimination within the AFN.
The Ulu ones and the stars, angels, and Inuksuk.
And there's no craft fairs in Nunavut this year, but the tradition carries on online. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. The 41st Annual Assembly of First Nations General Assembly wrapped up earlier this week. The two-day event touched on many issues, but one resolution calls for an investigation into discrimination within the organization. Here's Daryl Stranger with that story.
In the spirit of friendship, in the spirit of mutual respect, in the spirit of collaboration, let's begin our assembly.
In what was National Chief Perry Bellegarde's last First Nations General Assembly, many topics were discussed, including COVID-19 and UNDRIP. One topic brought up, though, was systemic problems with the AFN itself. Ontario Regional Chief Roseanne Archibald wants an investigative review of sexual orientation and gender-based discrimination within the AFN. She said change needs to happen.
This is not about political game. This is about transforming this organization and making it safe for women. We've had many executive calls where those have not been safe spaces for executive women. I want to tell you, I've been subject to some of those things myself, and so have other regional chiefs. And we have to go ahead with this. We have to.
Bellegarde said he fully supported this review, but wanted a few adjustments to be made.
I support the resolution. It's on the record. But I'm also respecting the Chiefs of Canada. We can get this done. I would ask the mover and the seconder in a respectful way if there could be some friendly amendments so that we can operate and move forward on this resolution as quickly as we can within the parameters we have here at the AFN.
A 9-point resolution was drafted and says, quote, "The investigative review is to examine specific incidents to assist engaging levels of systemic sexual orientation and gender-based discrimination experienced by people involved with the AFN." The resolution was moved by Squamish Nation councillor and spokesperson Hess Salem and seconded by Quinlan Dunn First Nation Chief Doris Bill. A 3-person panel of external experts made up of 1 youth, 1 knowledge keeper, and 1 women's council appointee will oversee the investigative review. The 3-member panel will report to the chiefs in assembly within 6 months with an interim report, followed by a final report within 9 months of this resolution's passing. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thanks, Daryl. This week, the Algonquin reached a landmark agreement with the province of Quebec. They'll soon be taking back control of child welfare service within 4 of their communities. The Algonquin Nation is only the second in Quebec to regain control of their own children. The Atikamekw signed an agreement with Quebec in 2018. 4 Algonquin communities are covered by the new agreement. The hope is to hire 90 employees to provide child services on reserve, but Quebec's legal challenge of the federal Indigenous Child Welfare Bill C92 is still a sore point for many.
Nous sommes en mesure de régler les situations qui nous concernent. En ce qui a trait à l'opposition du Québec, on trouve ça très, très malheureux. Comme plusieurs autres l'ont dit à travers le pays, c'est inacceptable que le Québec use de ces tactiques-là pour justement nous mettre entre l'arbre et l'écorce. C'est vraiment injuste et immoral quant à nous.
We want to hear what you think about the progress made on Bill C92, Nations Taking Over Child Welfare. You can share your thoughts with us. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can leave a comment on our website, aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and now TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Many northern students who want a post-secondary education face challenges like having to take upgraded courses before they can be accepted and limited degree choices. Now the federal government has invested in a post-secondary education task force to help fill those gaps. Here's Sarah Connors with how it will all work.
Tosh Southwick is from Kluwani First Nation in Burwash Landing, Yukon. She grew up in a community of about 70 people. Her schooling was limited, which made applying for university a major challenge.
When I was ready to go to post-secondary, I was broken when I found out I had to do 2 years of upgrading because the K-12 system failed me. I didn't have the prerequisites that I needed to get into university.
After 2 difficult years of upgrading at Yukon University, Southwick eventually earned a master's in education and worked at Yukon University for 12 years, making sure its curriculum met the needs of First Nation students. Now, she's one of 13 members of the newly formed Northern Post-Secondary Education Task Force and using her experiences to improve post-secondary education for Indigenous students.
What I hope to bring to the task force is to be bold and courageous, to make some change so that the generations that come don't have the same obstacles that we've got right now.
With few university programs available to Northern students, the federal government has invested $1 million in the force to improve post-secondary education. Led entirely by Northerners, members like Southwick will make recommendations on how to improve education outcomes in the North, like incorporating Indigenous degrees in universities.
You can get a PhD in golf in Canada, but nowhere can you get a PhD in reading the water, tanning a moose hide, traditional medicines. And that, to me, is a big symbol of the amount of work we still have to do with reconciliation.
Force member Melanie Bennett is from Trondaquichin First Nation and head of the Yukon First Nation Education Directorate. She'd like to see the government cover the cost of upgrading, which is often left to the First Nations.
If our students are going to post-secondary and requiring years of upgrading, that's a failure of the education system that led them there.
Put a little bit in.
Bennett plans on highlighting students' strengths in her recommendations, like including more land-based learning programs in post-secondary.
Land-based and doing it in our own language, in our own way, is probably going to be in the forefront as well.
Recommendations will be released later next year, and while Southwick can't change her own experiences, she's hopeful the next generation can have education their way.
We need northern solutions. We often have the South come up and tell us what needs to be done, but we have the capacity and the knowledge and the courage to do that here.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
We need to take a break, but coming up, more details about the COVID vaccine rollout.
We will continue to work with partners to increase cultural safety and respect for Indigenous peoples when planning the COVID-19 vaccine.
Welcome back. With news of a vaccine coming next week, the Government of Canada gave an update on its rollout. As Jamie Pashagumskum reports, that came with concerns over what they call grim news for the holiday season.
COVID-19 is still presenting a very clear danger to Canadians all across the country.
Because of rapid increases of COVID cases in Canada, officials are discouraging get-togethers and telling people to stay home for the holidays. Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller said with the vaccine on its way, Indigenous communities are prioritized, but there could be an issue with trust.
2 days ago, Health Canada approved the Pfizer vaccine, and this is encouraging news. However, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis have historically endured and continue to endure systemic racism and discrimination when seeking health care, resulting in mistrust in Canada's healthcare systems. We will continue to work with partners to increase cultural safety and respect for Indigenous peoples when planning the COVID-19 vaccine.
With cases skyrocketing across the country, Indigenous Services is troubled over rising cases for people living on reserve.
It is distressing that the number of active cases has doubled in the past month, and the current number of active cases is over 20 times higher than the peak number during the first wave of the pandemic.
Indigenous Services Health Officer Tom Wong says elders need to be protected. Canada's Chief Health Officer Teresa Tam says 97% of deaths are from people 60 years and older, and the majority coming from long-term care homes. She says we need to test more, and by December 7, there have been over 5,600 cases so far on reserve.
85% of the cases to date have been reported from the 3 prairie provinces.
Ottawa is predicting 12,000 new cases daily by January. In the meantime, Canadian Rangers are on the ground in Shamattawa, Manitoba, and Fond du Lac in Saskatchewan, and Indigenous Services will continue to assess their needs. Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Ottawa is releasing some stark predictions about the future of the COVID-19 pandemic. The country's top doctor says that Canada is on track to surpass 500,000 total infections by Christmas.
The predicted number of cases could be in the range of 531,300 to 577,000 by December the 25th. The predicted number of deaths that could be in the range of 14,410 to 14,920 by December the 25th.
Dr. Tam also says Canada could see 12,000 new COVID-19 cases per day in January if stricter measures aren't put in place. Well, Manitoba reached a grim milestone today with 447 new cases. The province now has surpassed 20,000 cases since the pandemic began in March. The province's top doctor is reminding people again to avoid non-essential travel during the holidays and to stay home as much as possible.
If we stay home, if we limit the amount of contacts, then there's no choice but for these numbers to go down. So if we have adherence to our orders, we're going to see these numbers come down. So that's it's so essential that we stay focused during this holiday season.
The province says its death rate has increased more than 9 times since Thanksgiving. Well, off to the East Coast, Nova Scotia RCMP have arrested 21 people so far in relation to 2 lobster pounds being vandalized back in October. Photos of 3 other men have also been released by the Mounties. They are asking for help in identifying these people of interest. The RCMP confirms about 200 people were present at those 2 incidents where rocks were thrown and a vehicle was set ablaze.
The RCMP at the time were heavily criticized for not moving in and making arrests at the time. And Chief Mike Sack of the Sibega-Negatiw First Nation has made, really, and continues to make public calls for the RCMP to make more arrests. Well, we've seen that now, 21 arrests, but no charges are laid. The RCMP tell us that charges are pending at this time.
The RCMP say that more arrests are expected, and we will, of course, keep following that. Well, it's time now for us to take another break, but still ahead, Northern craft sales going online.
You have to get used to the stretching and other stuff to experiment and to get used to cutting and trying to get them to be beautiful.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Sherry Hoorie sent this photo to us of her and her kids. They're surrounded by the Christmassy glow of an apartment building. Lots of people being very extra with their lights this year. You can send, and your friends too, send your pictures to us at share@aptn.ca, and your photo might be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Off to the east coast, we've got a mix of sun and cloud and 3 degrees for Fredericton, sunshine, and 3 for Halifax. Kuujjuaq -18, sunny skies, Nain -15, mostly sunny. Set Hills -7 and sunshine. Quebec City snow -1. North Bay snowing -5 degrees, -2 and some snow for Sault Ste. Marie. Mix of sun and cloud -8 for Sioux Lookout, -9 mix of sun and cloud for Kapuskasing. God's Lake sunshine -12 degrees, snow for Churchill and -17. -7 and sunny for Winnipeg, -5 and mix of sun and cloud for Dauphin and Brandon. -6 for Saskatoon and Regina, -7 snow for North Battleford. -15 and snow for Stony Rapids, snowing also in Uranium City, -25. -22 and some snow for Fort Chip, -6 and sunny for Fort McMurray. 0 with a mix of sun and cloud for Edmonton, -6 and some snow for Lethbridge. Campbell River in Vancouver, sunshine, 5 degrees, -3 and sunny for Quesnel. Smithers, -3 with mostly sunny skies. Dease Lake, sunny, -12. Dawson City, -21 with a mix of sun and cloud. Old Crow, -27 and sunshine. Wrigley, -13 and sunny. Wateet, -29, lots of sun there. Tuktoyaktuk, -28 and sunshine. Sax Harbor, -23 and sun. Still sunny when we get out this way. Nunavut, -30 and sunny, -31 for Whale Cove. Kenite, -20 and sunshine there. Arctic Bay, snow, -28. 33% of everyone living in Nunavut is an artist, according to Stats Canada. At Christmas time, you can really see it with the Christmas craft fairs, with handmade items. They're usually a big hit in Nunavut. But with COVID-19, there's no craft fair this year. Now meet a Nanook who has found a new way to get her work out there without leaving home.
Every year, Nancy Natanine Gupil makes these. One-of-a-kind, handmade seal fur Christmas ornaments. They're a bargain at $20 a pop. Her most popular ones?
The ulu ones, and the stars, angels, and inuksuk.
Usually she sells them at the annual Christmas craft fair in Iqaluit. Problem is, with COVID-19 restrictions, there won't be an annual Christmas craft sale in Iqaluit this year.
The stars are nice.
It has been challenging because I have to use my Facebook to sell, and I have to put them outside the doorknob, so that we don't have contact with other people.
So Nancy is trying something new. This Saturday at 9 a.m., she's part of a virtual craft sale. If you want to check out her and other Nunavut artists, just look for the announcement in Iqaluit Public Service Announcements on Facebook. If you live outside of Iqaluit, you pay your own shipping. Her sales are down a little compared to previous years, but this isn't pay the bills money. For Nancy, this is mostly fun money.
It's extra money to buy presents for my kids too and family.
There are 4 kids at Nancy's, which begs the question, how do you have time for this?
They know when I'm doing my craft, they're not allowed to bother me unless they really need to, like if they're hungry or, and my husband being supportive, he helps me. So.
Seal is as traditional a material as you'll find among Inuit, but making ornaments from seal has its own challenges.
You have to get used to the stretching and other stuff to experiment and to get used to cutting and try and get them to be beautiful.
The stretching, tell me a little bit about that. It's a stretchable material, right?
Yeah, when I buy commercially tanned, I have to stretch them. I have to put them a little water on the skin side and leave it in the fridge for 3 hours and stretch it and staple it on the plywood and then leave it overnight to dry, and then it gets bigger.
This is the payoff. Unique Christmas decorations. Uniquely Inuit. Nancy should sell lots of these online on Saturday morning. But she says the part of an actual craft sale that she's going to miss the most is buying crafts from the other artists in attendance. And you can't replace that online. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Canada's underfunding of First Nation child welfare is well known, but it's not only the federal government that's failing Indigenous children. Tonight on APTN Investigates, journalists Colin Crozier and Ken Jackson look into First Nations child welfare agencies that are putting children's lives at risk. I talked with Colin Crozier earlier today. So the first part of your story, the death report, looked into the deaths of 3 sisters with connections to a First Nations child welfare agency. Where does part 2 take us?
Yeah, well, like you said, part 1 really focused on Sasha Raven Bob and her 2 sisters, Arizona and Shania. All the 3 of them died by suicide with close connections to a First Nations child welfare agency in northwestern Ontario, Wichita Family Services. So my colleague Ken Jackson and I, basically we spent 12 days on the road in northwestern Ontario. We kind of went up and down the highway. We visited a bunch of different communities, spoke to families who've just been impacted by the child welfare system in different ways. So in part 2, part 1 focused on Sasha's story. Part 2, we wanted to kind of give an overview, kind of a bigger look at child welfare in northwestern Ontario, specifically as it relates to these First Nations child welfare agencies. You know, I think what a lot of people don't really realize is that of all the deaths in care, at least for Indigenous kids in Ontario, the majority are actually connected to First Nations child welfare agencies, as opposed to children aid societies, say run by the province. So actually, since 2013, we discovered there has been 178 Indigenous children who have died in the system in Ontario, and of that number, 147 were actually tied to First Nations child welfare agencies. That's about 82.5%.
And why is there more kids dying in care of First Nations run agencies than provincial agency?
Yeah, it's a good question, Melissa. I mean, there's a variety of factors. I mean, one of the big one is underfunding. Essentially, these First Nations child welfare agencies are chronically underfunded. That's no big secret. People have known that for years. There's also, understaffing, underqualified staff. There's just a variety of factors that really play into it. I don't necessarily want to get into specifics as to why these children are dying. It's a question that I don't know if I feel comfortable or if I'm the one to really answer those kind of questions as to why these kids are dying in the system. But there's glaring failures everywhere you look. Negligence to a point in certain deaths as well. So it's a good question. It's better left to policymakers in Ontario.
So you had said that you guys spent days, almost 2 weeks on the road. What was the response from First Nations child welfare agencies when you guys were snooping around and lifting rocks and shining lights into dark corners?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question as well. Both Part 1 and Part 2 of the death report, we really focused on Wet'suwet'en Family Services. They're a First Nation child welfare agency based in northwestern Ontario. They were responsible, or they were the agency that provided the care, if you can call it that, for Sasha, Raven, Bob, and her sisters. So we focused on that agency because it seems like a lot of the people we were talking to, the stories we were focusing on, they were involved with Wet'suwet'en. When we actually were in Fort Frances, where they're based, we tried to get an interview with the executive director at that time. She wasn't there. We were briefly in contact with her when we first started working, or first started putting stories out, kind of mid-October. She briefly contacted us regarding one story in particular, and then once we started hitting her up with harder questions about, in regards to the deaths, negligence, Sasha, all these people who have been impacted by their agency, basically she just stopped responding to any requests that we put out. So it's kind of been radio silence since then. So we tried basically last 2 months, 2.5 months, we've been repeatedly trying to get any kind of response from First Nations child welfare agencies regarding these stories, and they don't want to talk to us.
Well, thank you for talking to us. Can't wait to see the second part of the death report. That's tonight right after the news. Thanks for joining us, Colin.
Thanks, Melissa.
Well, that is your APTN National News to wrap up the work week. I'm Melissa Ridgen. I'll be back here tomorrow with your APTN News Weekend. Stay tuned right now for Colin Crozier and Ken Jackson's Look Inside the Child Welfare System, Part 2 of the Death Report. Have a great night.